Hey and welcome everyone. Today is episode 6 of the AKS Zero to Hero series. Episode, we're going to basically get an ASP.NET app that Gregor built using Visual Studio Code. We're then going to Dockerize it using a Docker file which Visual Studio has built for us. So we'll walk you through the Docker file, explain each step. We're going to build the container image. We're going to then run it locally. We're going to push it to the Azure Container Registry, and then we're going to deploy it to our AKS cluster. Quite a lot to do, but it shouldn't hopefully take too long, and we'll learn something along the way. You excited for this one, Gregor?
Yeah, looking forward to putting an actual application into AKS. So let's crack on.
Awesome. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Using that one. Let's actually put us both there as well. So that looks good. So I'm up in the GitHub repo of the Cloud Family. We've got a repository called AKS Zero to Hero web app. So yeah, we're in here. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to get this repo locally. So I'm just going to copy the clone URL here, open up Visual Studio Code. I've navigated to a folder which are called Git under the AKS Zero to Hero folder I have. And we're just going to do git clone, and then we're just going to paste in the URL to put it down. It's just going to put it down, create a nice folder, and all of the code that we had before is now up here. So inside here, we've got the solution project that you built for us. And we also have a folder called AKS Zero to Hero. Inside here, we have the application, but we also have a Docker file. So when Gregor was building the application, there was a tick box, I think, in Visual Studio, and it says, make this app compatible with Docker. Tick that box, it creates a nice Docker file for you. So let's just close this sort of.
Yeah, I literally opened up Visual Studio and did file new project, chose an ASP.NET Core web application, and there's a tick box to enable Docker support. So that's how we ended up with this file.
Which is awesome. And if you're not familiar, this is line 3 is basically telling us what container image on the open internet to use as a base. And this looks like it's from Microsoft.com, which is good because MCI is Microsoft Container Registry.Microsoft.com. So we know it's from a trusted source, and it's using .NET, and it's using the core version of .NET. It's also using ASP.NET 3.1. Now, Buster Slim is basically telling me it's a Linux container.
I thought it was your stage name.
No, yeah, no, I'm not Slim anymore. But yeah, Buster Slim tells me it's using Linux. So things like this you'll find is quite cool to sort of help you understand if it's going to be a Windows container or a Linux one. If it's Windows, you'll find in there probably LTSC 2019, 2016 and stuff like that. So this one here is telling me it's going to use it as a base container. What it will then do is create a working directory called /app. So that's in the root, and then /app. It's going to expose port 80 and port 443 for us because Gregor ticked the box saying make this app compatible with HTTPS. So it's put that line in there. Next, we have another container image called build. Oh, it's going to be the build stage. This one is basically using the same container registry, still .NET, still core, but it's actually using the SDK. So like all the developer tools are being installed inside this container that we're using to build our application. It's again using 3.1, but it's actually using Buster. So not the Slim version of Buster, so just Buster. So that has more stuff inside the container image ready to do some .NET restores and stuff. It then creates another directory called source, src. It copies the project file, the CS project file, over from the local file to this folder inside the container. It then runs .NET restore with that project that we just copied over in that folder. And then it copies everything else inside the folder that we're in and pastes it into the container. Then sets the working directory as source AKS Zero to Hero, and then actually builds the project in that build folder using the release branch, which is cool. So that's like so much easier already. I'm not a developer, but I can use this Docker file to sort of restore and build an application a developer's built. It then uses that build container, and it says from build as published. So now we're on the publish section, and we run .NET publish to publish the application to the container in the app publish. Now finally, it seems like a lot of work, but it's not too bad. We use the base container again, which was the 3.1 Buster Slim, and we're using that as our final container image. We then create the working directory /app, but what we do here is we copy from the publish container, so that's this container here. So from that folder, we copy everything out of that folder into the app directory. And then we start the container with an entry point, and we're saying use .NET and AKS 0to-hero.dll is the command. So that's basically the Docker file. Hopefully that makes sense to you.
Yep. It's probably going to be new to a lot of people, but yeah, out of the box, this is what was generated for us. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the best thing about all these tools is either someone else has already done it, so you can copy and paste other people's examples and just tweak it, or it automatically generates stuff for you like this, which is usually good enough to get your application up and running, and then down the line you can tweak it further, maybe get rid of port 80 and stuff like that. But usually out of the box, absolutely fine. So that's all good. So what we can then do is, if I get my terminal back open, we can navigate to that folder. So AKS 0to-hero web app. So now I'm in the root of the Git repo we just cloned. We've got the project in there and everything like that, but the Docker file is not in the root. That Docker file is under the AKS 0to-hero, but we're not actually going to navigate to that. What we're going to do here is do Docker build -t to tag the container image. We're going to call it AKS here, AKS 0to-hero, and we're going to tag it with a version 1, so version 1. So the first bit is the container name, and then the next bit is the version number. You can call it whatever version you want, but version 1 is always a good start when we're working with this. And we do the -f for file, and then we're going to basically navigate to the Docker file. So we're in this folder. So the next folder we need to go to is AKS 0to-hero. We can tab that, and it will auto-complete that for us. And then inside there, we have the Docker file, which is basically this file here. So we've got the root directory, then the one we've just put in the path, and then the Docker file. So capital D, make sure you put the capital D in there. Once we've done that, there's one more. The most important step is put a space and then a full stop. That full stop is so important. You'll see it in the code on other people's websites, and you might think, oh, they've just put a space instead of the dot. But that's so important. Make sure you copy that over. We then hit enter, and it goes off. It pulls some container images from the Microsoft Container Registry, checks the shard, the GUI, and all that matches. You can see it's pulling down quite a bit of data at the moment. This can take a while depending on the size of the container. These are quite small, so it's not too bad. If it's Windows containers, you're looking at gigs, it's going to download and everything. It's now started to do the actual build. So we started creating a source directory, copying the files over, and now we're just doing the restore there, the build, sorry. And it just goes super fast, and then it's done, and it's built the container image for us. So one line from your project I've just pulled out. I haven't made any changes. I've just done Docker build, and now I've got a container image. So if I do Docker images, see a list of all the images inside this, inside my machine. I've been playing with Kubernetes through Docker for Desktop because that's all I'm using. Is out of the box. So you've got all of these extra ones here. But what we care about is the AKS 0to-hero v1. And that's the image ID. That's how old it is, and the size is 212 megabytes. So it's tiny in size, which is why it took hardly any time to pull the images down and build. So that's awesome. Is that all making sense so far?
Yeah, I know the answer to this, but what was the relevance for the space dot? What was the dot meaning? See when you push up a couple of times. or up in your command?
This one here.
Yeah. What is the relevance? What is the significance? Sorry, of the full stop at the end.
To be honest, I don't actually know. I just know we need it. I've never actually looked into why I need it, but you think you know the answer. Let's hear what you think.
I thought it was just like build everything in this folder.
Yeah, I think actually you might actually be right thinking about it. Yeah, I think you're right.
Because if you take that away, it doesn't take it away and press return. Just see what error you get. So that will go right. I don't know where. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's asking for a path.
Okay. So
that makes sense.
Dot's the current folder.
Okay. Yeah, so see, like even in this series, Zero to Hero, I'm learning something as well. No one ever is an expert in anything nowadays. So cheers for that. So what we can actually do next is we can run the container image that we just created. So we can do Docker run.
So at this moment in time, we've got a web app, we've got a Docker file, we've built the Docker file basically, we've built the image using the Docker file, and now the image hasn't started, so now we need to start it basically, is that right?
Yeah, basically it's like creating an application, so you got your exe, but you've not clicked your exe to run it. Yeah. So Docker run is basically like clicking your exe to run. So if we do AKS hero to 0 v1, hopefully
so that's the name of this container image.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So with that Docker command above here, we had the -t for the tag, and then AKS 0 to hero : v1, and that's all we're doing is we're saying run that container image, and that's all we're going to do. We don't care about the name because we're just doing a test here. It will generate us a nice, cool, fancy name. So it says I've obviously spelled something wrong there. So let's what we're going to do, we'll cheat, and I will copy that there and paste that in there because I've obviously spelled something wrong. And that's actually just started the container for us. This is just some of the information you get inside the container when it starts up. So what I can do is if I create a new terminal window, and then I've got a command over on my other screen because it's a long one. So I would just, you don't want to watch me type that. I just can't even type the container name right. So basically it's docker inspect -f, and then it's looking for the name and the network status IP address, and it's also then doing a docker ps aq. So that's all. So if I do hit enter on that, it's going to get me a nice list of the container name. So I told you just going to pick a random funny name, and the IP address, which is 172.17.0.2. So I can actually open that in our web browser, and if I open a new tab, if all goes well, we should hopefully have a sample app running. Could take a little bit of time to come through. While that's running, if we go back here, we can actually use docker ps as well, which will give us the container ID, the name of, so the image name, the command that, which was the entry point. So up in the Docker file, we've got the entry point, which is the command it uses to start the container. And it tells us how long, well, when the container was created, if it's up or down, and how long it's been up, which ports are open, and then that random name it generated. So we go back.
The name is randomly generated for you.
Yeah, which is cool. So let's have a little look. So unfortunately, for some reason, it's not actually spun up locally, but I think we can continue with this into Kubernetes, because sometimes Docker does do this if you've got some settings wrong on your machine and everything. So that's all fine. We'll just carry on. Sometimes this happens, but we'll carry on. We'll get it running in Kubernetes and it should all be good. So let's just close that one, and we'll go back down to...
If we go back a little bit, docker inspect -f, what is that? Kind of inspecting the details of the container that we've just created?
Yeah, so the running container we have running here is inspecting the sort of that container and finding all like the name of it, the networking IP address. You can get quite a lot of information about that container. So this command here, I could put a name and just specify this one container, but what I'm doing with this command here is actually listing all of my containers running, and it'll get me a list of the name and IP address. So if I had multiple versions running, it would have lots of names and lots of IP addresses. But because we've got one, it's just so you don't have to worry about remembering the name if it's got some random thing and you copy and paste in. This way it just gets you everything.
How do I find help for Docker commands? Is it like a docker-help or anything like that?
Let's have a look. I think it's... Hopefully I got that right.
I know there's a Docker cheat sheet. Right, okay, cool.
Yeah, so Docker -- help, and you got that. Obviously, you got the Docker website, which has got loads of stuff. You've got Google and the Docker cheat sheet as well.
Yeah, okay.
So that's all good. So right, the next thing, we've talked in previous episodes about like Kubernetes manifest files and stuff like that and deployments. So what we need to do is create one. So in here, I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it manifests. And in there, I am going to create a new file, and we're going to call it deploy.yaml. Because no one wants to watch me type, as we found out, I've got it copied in another window, and we will basically just paste that into here. And we'll go through this. So let's just take this down a bit.
Couple of quick questions. Does it matter what the folder's called or the file's called? You can call it anything?
No, you can call it anything you want. Yeah, I just call it manifest because they are Kubernetes manifest files, and I've just called it deploy.yaml because we're deploying something. YAML always, it needs to be YAML or JSON, but everyone uses YAML, so use YAML. So here we've talked in previous videos about deployments. I think it may have been the second video. So here we're basically specifying a deployment. So we're using the apps v1 API version, which is the home of deployments, which is the kind here. We're calling it 0 to hero, and we're creating a label called app 0 to hero. So this is like key value pair for the label. Very important labels. I'll show you that why in a second. Replicas, we're only going to run one of these. Now here we've got selector match label app 0 to hero. So that tells me that any pods, so this section here is like to do with the pods and stuff, and it's saying this deployment needs to match the label app 0 to hero. And then here, this is the template for the pods, and it's saying app 0 to hero. So as long as that matches that, then it's all good. Without that, then these pods won't attach to this deployment. So you've got to make sure they always match up. Then it's saying this is the container image we're going to use, which is AKS 0 to hero v1. And this is the Azure Container Registry, which I've created previously. This could be any name you have. And I'm giving the pod a name of 0 to hero -image. Then we got the service. So the service is the bit like we talked about previously. It's like a CNAME, an IP address to access your application. Basic settings, the API version v1 again, and then we're using service, giving it a name. I'm using the type load balancer here. So we're just going to get an IP address on the Azure load balancer, so it's open to the world, rather than going through an ingress controller, because that's a bit too advanced. So we're just going to give it a public IP address on the load balancer. Again, we're using the label selector for app 0 to hero. So this says any pods and deployments with that label attached to the service, and then it can round robin between them. We're just going to use port 80, because your container image has port 80 open. We're setting the target port as 80, and we're just leaving the public port as 80, and we're using TCP. So that's the deployment manifest. Nice, simple, and I'll just save that. But one thing is, we're saying get it from this external container registry, but so far all we've done is actually build the container locally. We haven't pushed it anywhere yet. So that's the next steps, basically. So if we go to the terminal again, just bring that back up if I can. There we go. What we're going to do, we're going to use the docker tag command. I'm not going to type it this time. Hopefully I've got it in this thing here because it's quite a big command. So we're doing docker tag. And then we're tagging the container image we just create, so AKS 0 to hero :v1. And then we're tagging it with that container registry name, which is here. And then we're also using, so that's the container registry name, the first bit, which is a public resource. and then we're using the image name and tag. So I'm just matching that to the local one, but I'm tagging it with that. That's so important, this bit. So we hit enter. It's done that. So we can do Docker images again, and we should hopefully see at the top, we have the AKS 0 to hero v1 that we originally created, but we've also got another one, which is now tagged with the container registry and then the name we gave it, and then v1. Exactly the same size and everything. It even says it was created 11 minutes ago because they are the same image. We just created a new tag, so it's like a shortcut in a sense.
So
now, yeah.
Question: Why do you need two? Can you get rid of the first one?
Yeah, we can get rid of the first one now if we wanted to. Okay. You can use Docker delete and then just give the name, and it would just go.
Yep.
It's just we could probably have tagged it originally with this URL, but most people don't know where they're going to push it straight away. So they create it locally, test it all, make sure everything works, and then they tag it with the container registry, and then they use Docker push to push it up to the container registry. So we need to make sure we're logged into Azure. So I'm just going to do Azure AZ account show. So AZ account show, just to make sure I'm in the right subscription, which I'm in my MVP sponsorship. So that's good. I don't need to log in today. And then what we're going to do next is use the Docker push command, as I just mentioned, to push the container up to the Azure Container Registry. So Docker push ACR AKS 0 to hero.azure ACR.io, and hit enter, and that will start pushing the container up. But I've got an error saying authentication required. That's because I've not logged into the container registry. So even though I'm logged into Azure, you then also need to log into the container registry to be able to push to it, because with Azure you have different levels of access. So I could just have access to different resources and not the container registry. So you need to make sure your user has access to the container registry through the access control system, and then do AZ ACR login -n for the name, and then we need to put the name of the container registry in, which is just the first bit. So ACR AKS 0 to hero. So I'm just going to paste that in.
I keep reading ACRACs.
Oh yeah. It's ACR AKS, and then it says login succeeded. So that's all good. I'm logged back into the ACR. So then we do the push again, and this time it should go through. So it's, yeah, you can see it pushing the container images, each layer, I should say. So each one of these, as you can see here, is actually a layer. So they're individual components of your Docker file. So you know how we had all those build steps? That's basically what these are.
I remember reading a video about, or reading a book, and the guy was talking about an onion. So you think of the layers of different parts of an onion. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to say it. Yeah.
So you've built a Docker container, you've tagged it, and you're now pushing it up to a container registry. You could push that to Docker Hub, for example.
Yeah, okay. Definitely. Any container registry, even Google. I think GitHub's got one now as well, so you can push it up to there. Obviously, we're in Azure. It's easier to integrate with the Azure resources, so I'm just doing it that way because it's easier and you have more control, in my opinion, over it. So this can take a little while, depending on your internet connection. For some reason, my internet's going a bit slow today.
So if this was, we chose Linux. If we had chosen Windows as the operating system, would these files be a lot larger?
Yeah, a lot larger. So this was only 212, and the base images for Windows Server Core, you're talking like gigs, like
3 or 4 gigs.
Yeah. And then if you start putting things on it, like I created a container image the other day with .NET 4.8, and I was over 8 gigs in size. So yeah. Try and stay away from Windows containers if you can. Obviously, don't go out to set up and say, right, I'm building a brand new application, I'm going to use Windows containers. Only use them if you're like migrating legacy applications and where you need to. But yeah, try not to use them. So that's all good. So what I'm going to do next is basically make sure I'm in.
Yeah, sorry, I got a quick question. Can you actually query the get Azure Container Registry from here, or do you need to go to?
You can query it from here. I cannot, for the life of me, remember the command, but it'll be something like AZ ACR query, I think, something like that.
No, it's just right. Okay, you can. That's fine. I wasn't sure if you could.
See
Never
what the
actually tried
file
it.
comes back with. So I spelled query wrong because I can't spell.
No, that's actually how you do spell query. So.
All right. But yeah, there are.
You can do it. That's fine. No, that's cool.
See if we got the help file up, so we can show. Let's have a look.
I saw a list.
Yeah, so list will show you all the container registries under the current subscription. So it's in here somewhere. I think it's under the repository section. So manage repositories, image names. So yeah, you can find out what's running there and get information, but you can always log into the Azure portal and check there as well, which is cool. And so you can actually next? I was just going to say one more thing. You can actually build your Docker images and containers via ACR as well. So if you don't have Docker installed locally, you can actually build your container image via the ACR, which is really cool. So it's like AZ ACR build instead of Docker build. That's super cool because like if you're on a machine which is say Windows Server 2016, but you need to build a 2019 container image, you can't actually do that. So using the AZ ACR build, you can actually do it because you offload it up to Azure and it uses agents and which are compatible with the operating system. Another weird quirk with Windows.
It's a good tip, yeah.
So next, we're going to log into our container, our Kubernetes infrastructure. So I think I'm already logged in, but I'll do kubectl config, and I will use context because I've already got my kube config down from the previous episode. So I'm just going to say use context, and then basically just give the name, which will be AKS zero. What did I call it? Let me get a list of all my contexts instead. I cannot remember it, so we can do get context, which will give me a list of all of my contexts, and I have a lot, as you can see. So I have it already selected there, so I can just use that one. I'm already in there. It's got a star next to it, so let's just clear that and give it a nice screen. We'll do kubectl get pods to see if anything's running. We've got nothing running in the default namespace. We can do -A to check all of it. You can see we've got the standard kube system stuff, and we've also got an ingress controller, which we will go into in other lessons, but not today because it gets quite complicated. So what we're going to do next, we're going to cd into the AKS 0 folder and then into the manifest folder. If we do an ls, we can see that we've got the deploy.yaml, and we're going to do kubectl apply-f for file and deploy.yaml. Hit enter. That will go off and create the deployment and also the service. So if we push up a few times on the keyboard, we'll go to get pods without the -A. You can see we've got an issue here. We've got an error image pool. So we need to figure out what that actually means. So that could be anything. So let's do a kubectl describe pod, and we'll call that. I'll just copy that because I'm not going to be able to type that while everyone's watching. And what we can do with this, we can find out what's going wrong, and we can see it successfully assigned a node to run the container on. It's then failed to pull it, and it says unknown error, failed to pull an unpack image, failed to resolve reference AKS. So what that could mean is I've got something spelled slightly wrong somewhere. So what we will do, so yeah, it says AZ AKR 0 to hero ACR, no such host. So I've definitely got something wrong here. So what we can do, we can go to the Azure portal. Click on the right window. We'll have a little look, see what's going on. clearly I spelled something wrong somewhere. See, this is the joys of Kubernetes and images. No errors came up or anything. And this is how you troubleshoot.
This is how you learn more, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to search for container registries up in the top bar. And we can see I've got this container registry here. I've got a few others. Then we're going to go down to repositories, which is where we store all the container images. And we've got the AKS 0 to hero. And we've got the V1. So we're going to go down, drill down into that. Yep, that's all fine. So we have all of that there. So what I'm going to do, it even tells you the Docker command to pull it down locally. I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to go back into our manifest file. And I'm going to basically paste that into here. Save that. Hit up a few more times. It does look longer. I'm going to do kubectl-f again. So I'm basically doing the same command. It says the service has not been changed, but the deployment's been reconfigured, which is awesome.
I see what the issue was. You didn't have hero dot is Azure CR. You had AKS or to hero Azure CR without the dot.
That's cool. See, it's so easy to make simple mistakes like that. But now we can see once we fixed it, we found out what the issue was. We fixed it, and the container is running, which is awesome.
So you just reapplied. Yeah, just reapplied the YAML. Yeah.
Yeah, I fixed the issue in the YAML, reapplied it by using exactly the same command: kubectl apply -f and the YAML file. Kubernetes does its magic. It says, "Oh, this is what you currently got running. This is what you told me you now want running. So I will make that change." It hasn't touched the service because nothing changed on the service, only on the deployment. So it's made that change. It's pulled the image for us, and it's up and running. But it's not giving us the IP address because you know how we told it to use a load balancer. So to get that, we're going to use kubectl get service because we want to list a service, and then it tells us the public IP address, and it tells us it's listening on port 80, and it's going to route down to that node port onto the AKS cluster, and then it does its magic. So if we go back to the window and we open up a new one and we paste the IP address in, we have our website up and running. So even though it didn't actually work locally, that's just because there was an issue with my Docker setup potentially. Could be anything. I could have something in my host file wrong, or it could be my antivirus software causing issues, which I've seen in the past. So in a few simple steps, we pushed it up to the Azure Container Registry, we created a simple YAML file, nothing complicated at all, just to test it. And as you can see, it's up and running, it's working. It's super simple once you know how.
Got to throw a wobble at you, throw a curveball at you. Go into VS Code and see what it's got home privacy AKS 0 to hero. Let's change it to AKS 0 to hero V1. So if you go to pages,
yeah,
index.cshtml,
yeah,
and then put in
we could just change it. We could just change this here. Learn about. Let's learn about AKS with Gregor and Richard. And then we'll just get rid of all this next bit here. It's just a simple HTML file, isn't it? So as long as you keep it in the A tags, it should be fine. So yeah, we've made that change, which is cool. Let's close that bit there.
You've not got any tag. Change? Well, you've not really got any tag anymore. You've just got like an empty tag.
Oh yeah, so I have.
You can just get rid of the /a at the end if you want.
Yeah, we'll keep it in the P instead.
Yeah.
Because of the link that was in there. Cool.
So commit that and change, and let's see that change.
So if we can use VS Code again to just commit that. So we've got that YAML file now going up as well. So let's just stage all those changes. Changed X. And we'll just push that change. And then we'll synchronize that back up to the container registry, to GitHub. Yes, that's fine. So that change is now live in the Cloud Family thing. But what we have to do now we've made that change, we actually need to rebuild the container image.
Yeah.
So what we can do is, let's get rid of that notification there. We can use the up arrow a few times to find the Docker build command. It's in here somewhere. What we could do as well is change v1 to v2. Now, if I hit enter, what do you think is going to happen?
So it's just build a new version of it with a v2 tag.
So that's what we would like to happen. But if I hit enter now, it's not actually going to do that because of the folder I'm located in. It can't find that folder. I'm in the manifest. So I need to go cd ... and then cd. This is the folder. So because I was in the manifest file deploying that, we need to go back to the main one, and then we can hit up a few times and then do the build.
You forgot the dot.
I forgot the dot. The dot is so important. Cannot stress that enough. So yeah, that's now building the container with the changes we made.
Yeah.
It was a lot quicker this time because it's actually cached some layers that haven't changed. So you can see here the word cached. Because they haven't changed, Docker has its own cache. So it's quite clever. It just does what needs to change.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And then we can now do the tag again. So we use up a few times and then find the Docker tag. We change that to 2, and then we change that to 2. Hit enter, and that's tagged it. Now we got the push command, so that's in here somewhere as well. There it is, and we're just going to call that 2, and that will now push that new container image up. And you see all these layers already exist. It's just literally push 1 now, so it's a lot quicker because it knows it's already all these extra layers, so it's only going to make that one change, push it up, hardly any time at all. So that's awesome. And if we go back to the manifest file, and then we go and change that to v2, save that. So that's all. The only change we're making is v2 because it's the new one. And then we're going to have to cd into manifest again.
And then apply.
kubectl apply -f and then deploy. So I could have potentially stayed out of the manifest folder and just put manifest in here, but I'd like to do it this way because then I know I'm in the right folder and I'm not going to mess up and everything. And I could always just do kubectl apply.f because it's the only YAML file in there with the dot, and it will make that change. So I don't actually have to specify it. So if you have loads of YAML files in a folder, you can just put a dot in it, just apply all of them for you. And as you can see, the service again is unchanged, but the deployment has been reconfigured. If we do kubectl get pods, type in the right window, and we can see that it's running, but this one's only been at 26 seconds, which is cool.
So it's also got a new name, yeah.
Yep. The last few digits should change, just the bits after the last dash, because the deployment is still the same deployment. It's just changing the pod inside it. And then we do get SVC to get the IP address. Make sure that's not changed, which it shouldn't, because obviously it said it hasn't configured the service and it hasn't changed. So I'll just copy that again just to make sure I've got it in the clipboard. And then we go back to here. It's already there. And we do a control F5 to refresh. And we've got to learn about AKS with Gregor and Richard. That's awesome. How simple it is to make the change. You know, being a non-developer myself, I know a bit of HTML. You helped me a tiny bit because I left the end in A tagging, but I can make that change. I can fix it and I can redeploy it straight away. So simple, so easy.
So if I wanted access to that container, I can just pull that down if you gave me access to the ACR, the Azure Containerize. And then what could I do? Just run it? I can't really change it or anything like that.
You could exec it into it. So once you have it running locally on your machine, you can use get rid of that again. You can use kubectl exec, so exec dash.
So this is you basically shelling into the actual running container.
Yep. So then we're going to use 0 to hero as the container name. And then I'm going to use, I think this one might have bash, so we can try bash because it's Linux. If it doesn't have bash, it'll be ZSH probably. So yeah, there you go. I'm actually in the container now.
So if you do like an LS, you can see the contents of that.
Yep. We get all of the DLL, so we can then go see the AKS 0 to hero, which isn't actually a directory. I thought it was, but yeah,
I think it's just yeah.
I thought it was a directory. It's not. But we're already in the app directory. That's why. So I could do cd ... and then it goes out of the app directory, ls. Then you got your Linux things that you'd normally expect to see, like your etc and everything like that.
Okay.
So you've got access to do that. You can stop things like that by putting policies on, but we can go later into other episodes. We'll go through Azure policy for Kubernetes and stuff like that.
Okay, so just in summary, I went file new web app .NET Core inside Visual Studio. I ticked enable HTTPS. I ticked enable Docker support. That built the Docker file for us, so we didn't have to do that. But it's not too difficult if you just get used to using Docker. It's not too difficult to write a very basic. There's lots of examples out there. We're using different build layers. We built the code, pushed it to the ACR, and then ran it inside AKS.
Yep, exactly. Okay. And one good thing about Docker files is you can actually run PowerShell scripts from the Docker file. So if you're like setting up IIS, for example, in a Windows one, you can run the whole setup through a PowerShell script. If you're running a Linux one, you can get a Bash script running, and you can set all your systems up that way. So you don't need to just use .NET apps. You can have anything you want. If it can be done and scripted, you can pretty much build a container with it.
Okay, so see if you clear the screen here a wee bit.
Yeah.
What other sort of Docker commands can you show us? Just to give us a little bit of a flavour of.
We just do Docker. We can do Docker PS, which basically.
So what is PS?
So it's a way for it to. I don't actually know what PS stands for, but it lists your running containers, which is good to see. And then you have Docker images, and that lists all your images you have running. So all your images you have available on your machine. You obviously got your Docker -- help, which gives you all of your help, links and that. So you've got your Docker version, Docker wait, Docker update, Docker top, rename, pull, push, CP to copy files locally from your local system to your container and back forth. So definitely have a look at this. You can do quite a lot with Docker.
You mentioned a Docker cheat sheet. Can you just Google that quickly and show us where that is?
Yeah, of course. Let's have a little look. Get a new tab.
So this is really good for, obviously, getting up to speed with Docker.
Yeah, so it's on the docker.com website. And yeah, you got your build, share, run, Docker management stuff. Because you have Docker Swarm, which is like equivalent to AKS. Well, it's an orchestrator like AKS. I wouldn't say equivalent. It was there at the beginning. Some people still use it, but Kubernetes definitely won the orchestration race. So it's a nice, simple cheat sheet. Really, all you care about is these ones here. You'll notice quite a lot of these commands also have Docker container run, and whereas I just did Docker run, because you don't always need to put the word container in. It's best practice too, but I sort of don't. And they have like Docker kill and then the name of it, so you can kill the container. But another good thing to also know is with Docker for desktop, which I highly recommend everyone gets, you actually get a nice little sort of web GUI front end. Maybe not a web GUI, but a GUI. So here, this is that running container we have. From here, I can click this button and it will get me a sort of command prompt into the container. So I can do ls again, and that's the local one. I can then stop it. I can restart it. I can delete it. I can then do the Docker images, which will get me the list of all the container images that I have running. You can then also, which is really cool, you can actually click on the settings and you can actually create a Kubernetes cluster on your own PC or your laptop using Docker for desktop, just by ticking a box and then clicking apply and restart. So that's a really cool, easy, cheap way to play with Kubernetes as well. So you can have your own Kubernetes cluster running locally by a tick box. It's only one node, but you get everything you need to play.
I think it's worth talking really quickly about the power of Docker. So if I have a really complicated website, let's say, with lots of dependencies and stuff, what's the real benefit of Docker and the Docker files?
Yeah, so basically, if you have this website with so many dependencies, you're normally going to install it onto a virtual machine, yeah? And usually your ops team will have to figure out which dependencies need to install. Maybe they need a certain order, maybe they need special config and everything. And in the past, you don't always get that information from development over to the ops. I've been there myself. You know, sometimes we're spending quite a few late nights, and then we ring up a developer and they go, oh yeah, you need this redistribute, and then you put it on and everything comes back to life. With Docker, in your Docker file, in your container image, you specify everything you need in that Docker file. So as soon as the developer or the ops person has built that, or the pipeline has built that container image, it has everything it needs to run. So you don't have to worry about installing this, installing that, configuring this, because it's all specified in that container image via the Docker file. And that saves so many headaches.
Yeah, I've seen guys like Dan Whalen basically create workshops in Docker containers, so that when there's 40 people in a workshop, they download the Docker container and they give instructions on how to run it, and all of a sudden you've got a living, breathing like Node.js website that's an actual workshop that people can work through. Yeah. So containerizing your app, Dockerizing your app is a really nice way to kind of contain all your dependencies for an application and then be able to share it with people. So.
Yep. It just makes life so much easier, you know. If you publish it to like Docker Hub, and then anyone can access it. So if you've got like a cool app that you want everyone to use, put it at Docker Hub, tell everyone about it. They can do Docker pull and the name, and they've got it running.
Another nice example, I think, is if you're doing things like Java or Oracle or something like that, and you don't really want to install these bits of software all on your local machine, you can just spin up inside a container. So you can download a SQL Server container or an Oracle container or a Java version blah container, and away you go, and just delete it at the end of the day when you're finished with it.
Yeah,
which is very powerful. So yes, I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit, because some people don't really understand Docker and why it's useful. So I just really like using it for spinning up things and then throwing it away at the end of the day.
Yeah. And now talking about Docker, I've mentioned in a previous video that Kubernetes in AKS doesn't actually run Docker anymore. But we've just actually built a Docker container image and we've ran it in Kubernetes. So there's a lot of talk about, oh no, AKS isn't supporting Docker anymore. It still supports Docker container images. It just doesn't use the Docker runtime, which is like we're using locally on the machine. It uses containerd, which came from Docker. So it's just a lightweight version of it, basically. So just to put that out there, even though AKS doesn't run Docker anymore, it still supports Docker containers.
Right. Okay. So to summarize quickly, brand new ASP.NET Core web app. We got a Docker file from Visual Studio. If you don't do that, you can create your own. You build the container. You deploy the container to Azure Container Registry, and then from there you basically created your manifest file and deployed and applied that manifest file to AKS. So you're deploying your web app to AKS.
Yeah, and we got all that code for the web app and everything in our Git repo. So just put that on the screen now. So if anyone wants to go and pull it down, play with it, the manifest file will be up there. Just change your container registry name. Make sure you spell it right, unlike I did the first time. And obviously just have a fun, play with it, fork it, do whatever you want to do, and let us know how you get on. If you have any issues, give us a shout, and we'll try and go through it and figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. So thanks everyone for watching episode 6. If you've liked it and you found it useful, please subscribe and click the thumbs up, because it definitely helps us to know that we're doing something good and people actually want to continue this series. And don't forget to click the notification bell to be alerted for the next release.
What's next is the question. What's the next episode 7?
So we've got the deployment, we've got the app running as a deployment, we've got the service and it's publicly load balanced. So I think the next one we're going to talk probably, well, we did a little update here, but we're going to talk maybe more about how to perform an update properly using rolling updates and the different things and node surges and stuff like that. So sort of go a bit deeper into the deployment upgrades, updates sort of thing. Yeah, I think that will probably be best.
Okay, sounds good to me. Look forward to it.
Awesome.
Thanks for putting up with my silly questions.
No worries. It's always good. But yeah, hopefully everyone's learned something. And until next time, thank you.